in. I know this meeting, or sorry, it was just talking to me. I know some of you played today. I know some of you had practice. I know we practiced today. So thank you for tuning in to get a little mental performance skills training. I know some of you got two or three tournaments left, so we wanted to get this in before the fall season was done. And my big thing of why I wanted to do this one, because, and I was talking to Becky about this, is I'm tired of seeing the players making same mistakes over and over and over again and not understanding how to make adjustments. And I think in a game of failure, we're always learning, we're always trying to get better. But sometimes we talk about making adjustments, but we're not really specific on how we make those adjustments, right? The process of doing so. So we're really going to be specific about how we do things before tournaments, before games, during tournaments, during games, and then after even your season's over, or after a game, or after a tournament. What steps we can take to get better, to control our emotional triggers during games, to look at the season in retrospect and see, oh, I need to work on these things specifically. All right, how we do those is super important. Before going into tournaments, before games, between games, in the moment is super specific and important. And then once a game's over, or once a tournament's over, or a season's over, we have to look back and make adjustments, whether it's big adjustments or small adjustments. Uh, but going about those is important if we want to become better athletes, better softball players, better people. All right. So, second. All right. So we're going to talk about making adjustments. Let's go over our agenda real quick. And again, I don't want to take up a whole hour because I know, again, some of you it's 8 o'clock on a Sunday, but I really want to try to hit the 30, 40-minute mark and then ask for questions and help you guys out as quickly as I can so that we can make sure that we're hitting the things you want to hear. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is how to plan for making adjustments pre-tournament or pre-season, right? So over the winter, things that you should maybe be doing. All right, how to plan for making adjustments and then how to make adjustments in the moment during a game. And then the last thing we'll cover is how to make adjustments post games, tournaments, and season. So a very micro level to a very macro level. All right. So let's talk about, hang on just a second. Let me move some of this. Oops. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is how to come up with a plan before you fail. All right. I always talk about great athletes don't expect to fail, but they are never surprised by failure because it happens to everyone. You are not immune to it. So why shouldn't you be prepared for it? Right? We cannot be always surprised um, when we fail. And I feel like some of you are like, when you fail, you're like, oh my God, what do I do now? And that's what we're trying to do with this, with the change your what ifs to even ifs. Because again, we're not expecting to fail, but we should never be surprised for it. So this is something that I think is crucial for when you go, before you go into a game or a tournament or a season. We're going to change your what ifs to even ifs. So how to come up with a plan before you fail. So what does that sound like? What do I mean by what ifs to even ifs? So this is what it should look and sound like. So what if I don't get a hit? You change that to even if I don't get a hit, I can dot dot dot. And we'll finish these sentences later. All right. I just wanted to give you some examples of what I mean by change your what ifs to even ifs. So what if I don't get a hit? Turns into even if I don't get a hit, I can still do these things. Right? What if I don't pitch well? Okay. Even if you don't pitch well, I can still do these things. Okay. Plan. What if I make an error? To change that to even if I make an error, I can still do these things to prepare for the next opportunity or whatever that is. We think about all the scenarios that are based in fear. Your fear of failure, whatever that failure is, we need to change what if it happens to even if it happens. So you're never surprised by it when it does happen. Okay. And it's not going to, like I said, it's not that you're expecting it to happen, but you're not going to be surprised by it when it does, because none of us are immune to have making mistakes. This game is all about failure. You've heard that since you were 5 years old, but very few of you are going into games or seasons or tournaments with a plan right? A even if plan for when you do fail, right? So let's talk about first, before I get into the I cans, right? I want to remind you of things that you can do no matter what. Okay, so this takes no talent. Play hard and be aggressive. I talk about this all the time. This takes no talent. It's just about playing hard and being aggressive. Again, another thing that doesn't take talent, cheer loud and have great energy and help your teammates be their best. These are three things you have control of no matter what kind of day, what kind of game, what kind of tournament or what kind of season you're having. You can always play hard, be aggressive, cheer loud, have great energy and help your teammates be their best. Because that's what a good teammate does. It's all of these things. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't require you perform well. Does that make sense? All right. So let's talk about the I can, right? So when we change that what if to even if statement, even if I make an error, even if I strike out, even if I don't pitch well, I can still, here are some examples of the way to finish that sentence. And these are crucial. The first one, and I wrote these off the top of my head this morning. It doesn't take a lot of training to do this, right? But it's still got to be within your control. So even if I do this, I can still trust my training and give my best effort next opportunity I get. These are things you need to write down. We'll talk about what a mental performance journal is later on, but I require everyone on my team to have a mental performance journal. And these are the things I expect them to have in their journal prior to going into seasons and tournaments and games. So even if I strike out, I can still trust my training to give my best effort the next opportunity I get. Okay. So again, these are just my examples. You can come up with your own and word them any way you want. The second example is even if I don't pitch well, I can still have confidence in all the work I've put in, right? Because some days are going to be better than others. Some games are going to be better than others, and you're going to have great tournaments and you're going to have terrible tournaments. That's normal, right? We all want to be consistent, but we're going to have ups and downs. And even if you go 0 for 4, you can still have confidence in all the work you've put in. Believe me, as a hitting instructor, I get videos and texts of all kinds during weekends. Oh my God, this kid hit 2 bombs and she's doing amazing and she's hitting like 600 this tournament. All the way to the other end of the spectrum of, I don't know what's wrong with her. She's 0 for 7 with, 6 Ks and it's just worst case scenario, right? So I know that players have that kinds of weekends. In the same, teammates on the same team can have great weekends, and another teammate can have their worst weekend. But it doesn't mean they're any less of the player or more of the player than they were when they started. If they put in the work, they still should have confidence in the work they put in, right? That should never change. And I think some of you need to remind yourselves of that. So writing it down with an even if statement by finishing it with even if I strike out or even if I don't get a hit, I can still have confidence in all the work I've put in. And the last one is
Let's go.
Even if, okay, somebody just unmuted or is talking.
I got it.
All right, thank you. Another example, even if I do blank, I can still have confidence in my abilities that I've worked so hard to build up. It's just another way of saying the same thing, right? I need you guys to understand that if you're putting in the work, right, that is where your confidence should be attached to. Your abilities, all the work you put in. If you do that, it's like being prepared for a test. It's like studying for a test. Then you should have confidence in that. So trust your training, trust the work you put in, trust your abilities, and remind yourself of that when these mistakes happen, when you strike out, when you give up a home run, when you make an error, when you make a bad decision and throw it to the wrong base and a coach yells at you. You can still trust that you're the same player you were the day before and have the same abilities as when you made a great play. Nothing has changed just because you made a mistake or something didn't go your way. So we have to remind ourselves by writing these statements prior to games and tournaments. Even if blank happens, I can trust my training, have confidence in the work I put in, and my abilities that I've worked so hard to build up. Okay. Now, that's pre, right? That's pre-game. We need to be prepared for failure. Don't expect it, but never be surprised by it. So that is key going into tournaments. So I would expect some of you, right, to start writing your even if statements this week before you get to whether it's the Gold Cup or whatever tournament you're going to next, and see what a difference it can make. And because I promise you, you write these things down and you're specific enough about them, when it does happen in a game, you'll remember what you wrote. So, what happens during the tournament? Okay. So, we need to make adjustments in the moment. And most of the time, when we are not making adjustments in the moment, it's because we are emotionally triggered by an event. So, how do we deal with our emotional triggers? So, the first thing we're going to talk about is examples. What is an emotional trigger? Okay. So, I've written a few down. These are easy to come up with, and I guarantee you could probably add 10 more to this list. But obviously, number one, bad calls by umpires. When they call the ball 3 balls off the plate and at your ankles, right? You strike out looking. Again, could be a bad call and you strike out looking. And then number three, making an error, right? I've seen this even on my team. Well, one error turns into 3 errors in the same inning. And that is an emotional trigger, right? Giving up a home run as a pitcher, right? 0-2 count grand slam, right? Happened to our team this year, all right? And it didn't get any better in that inning because we were emotionally triggered. Taking a perfect pitch right down the middle. I know probably everyone on this call has done that. Even I did when I played. That can be an emotional trigger. Swinging at a terrible pitch. Taking one right down the middle and swinging one over your head or in the dirt. And then, of course, when a coach or parent yells at you, that can also be a huge emotional trigger for you. Now, like I said, you could probably add a ton more to this list, but that gives you examples of what happens, an event that happens that sends you down an unproductive thought spiral. Okay, so let's talk about when that event happens. What does being emotionally triggered feel and look like? And because coaches, we can tell when that last play is starting to affect the next play. You're angry and frustrated. We get that, right? You have bad body language or non-confident body language or frustrated body language. You're throwing your hands up. You're shaking your head. You don't appear very confident in your walk up to the plate. We see that stuff. It's like a billboard for others to know what you're thinking. Believe it or not, you get low energy and low effort. I've seen this even within lessons. When somebody gets angry and frustrated and emotionally triggered, their effort and their energy go down. And it happens in games all the time. You become undecisive. You can't decide to charge a ball, go back on a ball, dive for a ball, whether to steal or not, or take off, reading the bat off the ball, all these things, whether to block or frame or whatever that is, you become really indecisive, I should say. Sorry. And then non-aggressive goes hand in hand with indecisive. Like I said, you don't charge balls. You're not swinging at good pitches. You're not diving for balls. You're not taking the extra base when you should. That all looks like an emotional trigger. And then, of course, you're not confident. And finally, you're making the same mistake over and over and over again. It's what you might call a mental block about something, but it comes down to being emotionally triggered by an event and an unproductive thought process. Okay, so now that we know what emotional triggers are and what they look and feel like, all right, let's talk about what we do in the moment. All right, and there's an acronym that I want you to write down and remember. And I've talked about this multiple times, especially with my team. We AIM, AIM. What does A stand for? It stands for acknowledge or admit, either one, right? Acknowledge that you're emotionally triggered. You have to admit it. You have to recognize it. You have to acknowledge it. I am emotionally triggered. I and just sit in it for a second or two, right? Be mad, be frustrated. It's okay. Those are real feelings and should be acknowledged when terrible things happen, when things that, an umpire does make a bad call on you. It sucks when you do make an error or get a bad hop or give up a home run. I am not saying you should be all butterflies and rainbows and thinking about unicorns all the time. And it's okay. It's okay. We're not going to be that way. It's okay to be emotionally triggered, but we cannot stay in it. We have to we have to recognize one that we are, and then two, we have to start listening to the story that we're telling ourselves. So I stands for interpret, right? Because when you're emotionally triggered, your thoughts sound like, oh no, here we go again. I knew this would happen. I suck. The umpire hates me. My coach is going to bench me. Oh my God, my dad or mom is going to be so mad. I'm sure those thoughts sound super familiar, right? However, they're usually not based in facts or reality. Okay. So we have to be able to, one, admit that we're emotionally triggered, and two, interpret the story you're telling yourself. I've heard um, kids that I've coached and that take lessons from me come out of a bad hitting game and walk up to me and jokingly say, "Oh my God, I suck so bad I can't hit." And and I'm thinking of a kid, and this particular kid is playing D1 softball now. And we've probably all said that. But without acknowledging that we're triggered, and if we say that enough, especially out loud, your body and your brain is going to start believing that. So that story that you're telling yourself in your head starts to take a negative effect. And when we are emotionally triggered and we don't acknowledge it, we don't really consciously listen to the story we're telling ourselves in our head, we start believing it and we start acting like it. And that's why we do the same things over and over and over. And we always swing at the rise ball and we take the last third strike down the middle and all those things that your coaches tell you got to stop doing. That's the reason why you keep doing them, is because you're not acknowledging it. You're not listening to what you're telling yourself. And certainly you're not managing the thoughts and the story, right? Because and by the way, this is AIM. Acknowledge, interpret, manage. Acknowledge, interpret, manage. We have to admit it, we have to listen to it, and then we have to manage those thoughts and the story that we're telling ourselves in our head. Because let me tell you, let's talk about what managing looks like, okay? And then we'll go into kind of the secret of emotional triggers and how we can overcome them. But so this is what I'm talking about when I say the secret. We have to realize that the triggering event, whatever the event is, the bad call by the umpire, the strikeout looking, the error, the giving up the home run, the coach yelling at you, that triggering event has literally zero power over you. That triggering event only holds the weight you give it, meaning it's only important as you make it. Because I promise you, you're the only one thinking about that triggering event after the game. As a coach, I'm not. I'm not. And I guarantee you, your mom and dad in general, good parents, aren't ruminating over these things all the time. They genuinely want you to do good and they love you, right? They're not obsessing about every little thing that goes wrong with you. So realizing that this triggering event, things that happen aren't personal to you, they just happen. And they happen to everybody on this call if you're a player, right? The umpire that made the bad call didn't wake up and say, you know what? I hate that player on that team. I'm going to call every terrible pitch only on her today. Now, I know it feels like that, right? But that's genuinely not what's happening. So, whatever that triggering event is, you have to understand that if you give it power and become emotionally triggered, you absolutely have the decision to take that power back. Tell it in your head, you have no power over me. It is something that happens to everybody, and I will overcome it. But without recognizing, without doing the acknowledge, interpret, and manage, without realizing that triggering event only holds the power you give it, it will continue every time it happens to affect your outcomes. You also need to realize that the thoughts you are having as a result of that triggering event aren't coming from you. And I know that sounds weird, right? But our thoughts in these high pressure situations are a result of environmental stimulus. Okay? Our brains are hardwired to protect us. You are not the thoughts you're having. In fact, you're the person, you're the person listening to these thoughts. You're not the thoughts. Okay? Your brain is throwing these thoughts at you to try to keep you from danger. And I know that sounds weird because some of these thoughts are very counterproductive to your goals of getting hits and being a good hitter and being a good pitcher and being a good player. But it's a direct result of a fight or flight response. And so your brain is telling you all these things to make you to stop doing things that cause you stress. And so in a weird way, it makes sense that your brain does this. But you have to remember, you're not saying I suck to yourself. Your brain is telling you these things because it's a direct result of something that happened in your environment, an event that happened around you. Now, what's great is that you have to realize that you have the power to choose to believe them or not. So if you're not the thoughts you're having in these triggering events, if they're just coming at you and you realize, okay, I'm not having these, I'm not telling myself these things, I'm listening to them, and I can choose whether or not to embrace them, to tell them, yes, you're right, or to tell them, no, I don't suck. Nobody's doing this to me on purpose, right? These things happen to players. It is normal, and I have planned for this. I know what I'm doing. I trust myself. I can, right, do better, trust in my abilities, have confidence in the work I've put in. You have to make sure that when we do the aim, the acknowledge or admit, interpret the story, and then manage, we have to realize these three things. These three things. Triggering event has no power over me. The thoughts I'm having are not coming from me. I can listen to them. And when I realize that, I can choose to believe them or not. That is a big key in how you overcome and make adjustments in the moment. And finally, you have the power to come up with more productive thoughts that can help you make adjustments in the moment. That is where you come in. When you realize it has no power of you, that your thoughts aren't coming from you, they're coming from the event, and you have to choose to believe them or not, now you can start managing them by coming up with rescripted or reworded thoughts that can help you make adjustments in the moment. All right? Now, what does challenging a thought look like? All right, we're going to give you some examples. Here are some, again, that I wrote this morning. Every time I write them, they look a little bit different, but these are something you can say. And I need you to write these down, right? And have them in your back pocket for when these things happen during games. You have to script these prior to, again, the tournaments, the games, the seasons, so you can be prepared with them in the moment. So there's a little planning that takes place. Remember that plan for failure? You need to write challenging your thought statements. So the first one is, it's okay. I can do this. I've done it before. Just focus. Some of these are wordy. I'm putting too much stuff in. You can shorten them, make them more succinct, word them however you want. But I like this one because it's a reminder of, hey, I've done this before. I can hit. I'm pretty good, right? It's okay. I got this. I've done it before. Just focus. And then you just go into your pre-pitch routine. Another one I wrote, I may not have my best stuff today because maybe you don't, but I have to give it all for my team. And this is another thing I want you to understand, that I don't want you to lie to yourself. There are going to be days where you don't have your best stuff, right? Your pitching's off, your swing feels funky, and it doesn't seem like you can field a ground ball. But what I need you to remember is that you're not the only one out there, and you can't lower your energy level, lower your effort, because your team is depending on you. And some of the best players I've ever coached, when they fail, they try harder. And they're very intentional about give me the ball again, because even if I make another mistake, I am not going to try less. So change your perspective. Hey, I might not have my best stuff today, but I'm going to help my team. I'm going to be valuable, and stop trying to be perfect. That's a big thing on my team. We talk about being valuable versus trying to be perfect. Perfect is selfish, valuable is all about the team. So when you don't have your best stuff, it doesn't mean you try less. It doesn't mean you sit on the bench and pout. It doesn't mean you turn your back on the field and have side conversations. It means I give it all for my team, even when I'm failing. You have to have these thoughts prepared before this happens. Another one I wrote, you've got this. I've put in the work. Now just let it go. So many times we're letting our brains get in the way. We're too analytical. We're trying to think through things, and we're not just trusting our athleticism, right? You've got this. You've put in the work. Let it just happen. Feel it, right? I'm a big Star Wars guy. I'm like, use your feelings, Luke. Use the Force. So it's just, that's kind of what I hear when I see this. You've got this. Just let it go. Let it happen. Trust in your training. Trust that your body knows how to do it. Just be aggressive, and I promise your athleticism, your training will kick in, and you got this. But this is the things you have to have prepared to pull back out to challenge the thoughts when you get emotionally triggered. Number 4, I'm the only person that can stop me. If I focus on my training, I can do this. You have to remind yourself that the best version of you can show up. All you got to do is let her. You're in charge of her. The best version of you. And the best version of you is not about going 4 for 4 with 4 home runs. The best version of you shows up to hustle, shows up to cheer loud, shows up to give it all she's got, 100% of whatever you have that day. That's what I'm talking about. That's the only person that can stop you from doing that is you. So if you focus on your training, you got this. And 5, remind yourself that your teammates believe in you. My teammates believe in me. I've got to help them with whatever I've got. Right? It's really great when you understand when you're on a team that people, yeah, even though maybe you're struggling to believe in your skills that day, I guarantee your teammates do. So remind yourself, my teammates believe in me. I've got to help them with whatever I've got. That's a great way to manage emotional triggers. Now, I know that seems like a lot, right? But we've got to make sure that process is in place when these things happen during a game, right? Now, like I said, you can shorten these, right? Rewrite them, make them sound like you, but whatever that is, we've got to make sure that when we get emotionally triggered in a game, we aim and then we challenge, right? Okay. So how do we make adjustments post game or tournament? All right. This is where it gets a little more like analytical, right? It's not so much in the head. It's stuff that you can do. And I'll say it, 3 times. Journal, journal, journal. If you don't write this stuff down in a journal, it's not going to make a difference. You will forget it. And I can't stress that enough. That your journal is something that you write in. It is not your phone. Okay. I make my team, and it doesn't have to be some fancy performance journal. It can be a spiral notebook. It can be 8 by 10, normal spiral notebook. It can be something really small. I honestly have like 2 or 3 of them, and they're all in different shapes and sizes, and leather and not leather and all that stuff. And they come with a pen. They don't come with a pencil. It doesn't matter. Just it needs to be something you can actually write in with a writing utensil. And I know that's old school. But there is scientific evidence about writing things and how it correlates to putting them in practice. So these things are important. Okay. Your journal needs to go everywhere you play, practice, or practice your sport. Everywhere. Don't leave it at home. Don't leave it in your car. Don't ask your mom or dad to carry it. Put it in your bag. Because when you need it, when your coach tells you to pull it out, you should have it. And listen, if your coach is not equipped to do the mental performance part, and that's okay, because 99% of them aren't, right? They're just trying to manage the game and help you guys as best they can, right? This is on you, not your coach. So have that journal and pull it out after an at bat. If you have something there physically that you can go to between games, before games, after games, or tournaments. It helps tremendously. Okay. And it needs to be used every time practice, play, or train, right? I encourage my hitting lessons to have it with them because if they're like, oh, I discovered something, like my daughter was home from college and she wanted to hit with me, so we went to the facility and we hit, and it took her a while, but she figured out what felt wrong. It's we talk about it, we talk, and she's like, oh, I got it, and she wrote it down afterwards. It was my posture. I was losing posture before I turned, right? And so, and I know that doesn't make much sense to you, but we have our own language when we talk about hitting, and that was big for her. And 45 minutes to an hour, and that's all that came out of it. And that's what she's going to take back with her. And she wrote it down to make sure she remembered. So it needs to go everywhere with you, whether it's just to a practice, a game, tournament, or just a training lesson. You need to make sure that you have it with you so that you can actually use it when you discover something, when you have a breakthrough, when you need to diagnose an at bat or a game or an emotional triggering event. You can write these things down, and that's what we'll talk about in a minute. But it's got to go everywhere with you. It's got to be a physical tool that you can write in. Okay. So, what do you need to capture after games, tournaments, and seasons? Part one. Let's talk about games. Okay. So, after a game, what do we need to talk about? The first thing you need to write down is capture your performance outcomes. Whether it's your at bats, your pitching, your defense, whatever that is, write down how you did. Write down first, second, third at bat, what you did, what you remember about. This is super important to make adjustments. Number two, capture what you focused on during optimal and non-optimal performance outcomes. And what that means is remember back what you were focused on when things were going really good and when things were going really bad. I need you to think back and go, okay, what was I focused on? So this happened today. And one of my kids at bats at practice, we were having scrimmaging, and she came up and she swung at first pitch changeup. I don't know what she did, fouled one off, and then swung at a bad turn, something like that. And I said, okay. And she went back to the dugout, and this is one of my best hitters. And I go, what were you focused on? And she goes, I was focused on not striking out, which is the wrong thing to be focused on. Because I can tell you this is how your brain works and understands focus. And if she's focused on not striking out, your brain doesn't understand the word not. It understands striking out. So she struck out. That happens, right? You focus on not swinging at the rise ball, not swinging at the changeup, you do it anyway because your brain understands the focus of it. So if you're focused on what you don't want, okay, you'll have a non-optimal performance outcome. Now, second at bat, I remind her, focus on what you're expecting. Focus on what you're trying to do. She hits a bases clearing triple. It makes things happen. We go to the plate focused on what we want instead of what we don't want, and we will have different outcomes. So we've got to capture these things. You have to go back. If you don't have a coach that can do that for you in the moment and you don't remember to do it in the moment, then after the game, think back at your at-bats and games. What were you focused on when things went wrong? And what were you focused on when things went right? And write those down. Capture them. Capture your thoughts during optimal and non-optimal performance outcomes. Not just what you were focused on, but actually what the thought was going through your head, right? If you heard, I have to get a hit or don't strike out, right? Capture those thoughts and write them down and ask yourself, how did that work out? Because I can promise you, if you're at bat and you have an I have to thought or a don't thought, thoughts that start with those words, things are not going to go well for you. Okay? Because how many times have you told yourself, don't do something at the plate and you did it anyway? Again, your brain understands focus. It doesn't understand the negative part of that sentence and the don't. Okay? So if you're telling yourself, don't swing at the rise ball, you're going to swing at the rise ball because that's what your brain is thinking. That's what she wants. That's what she's focused on. So capture those thoughts so you understand when they happen, you can change them. And I'll tell you a really quick story about my daughter. She was playing in the Ronald McDonald, playing for Prinzo at 16U. She was having a great day. And her last two at-bats of the last game of the day were not good. She popped up and struck out. And she had a catcher's bag. She was catching back then, and she walked off. She was always the last one out of the dugout. And right as I got to her, she goes, no, don't tell me. I know what I did wrong. And I was, because she was my guinea pig on all this before you guys got it. And I go, oh, okay. I go, what was it? And she goes, my first at bat, I told myself, don't strike out. And I did. In the second at bat, she was telling herself, don't pop up. And she did. And she knew it. She journaled it. She already said, I wrote this stuff down in my journal. And all we did by the time we got to the car was talk and decide where we were going to go eat after the games. That was it. That conversation lasted about 5, 8 minutes. And by the time we got to the car, we were more focused on dinner than we were about what she needed to do or things she needed to change in her swing, which her swing was fine. It had nothing to do with her abilities. It was everything to do with what she was thinking during those at bats. And I'm telling you, some of you are keep trying to fix something in your swing when it's not about your swing. You put in the work, your swing's great. It's about what you're focused on. It's about what you're thinking that is really causing you to do the same things over and over again and not make adjustments. Capture the differences in what you were focused on and what you were thinking during optimal and non-optimal performance outcomes. We just talked about that. You got to understand the differences, and when you're doing things right and everything's going your way, what are you focused on? And when things aren't going well, what are you focused on and what are you thinking? And then look at the differences. They're going to be really stark differences of what you feel like and what you're thinking and what you're focused on when you do good and when you do bad. And the last one is write down what you're going to focus on and what your thoughts should be during your next high pressure situation, during your next game that you play, right? That's how we make adjustments from game to game. Use that mental journal to do these things. Okay. All right. Now, part 2 is about tournaments. So we're going to talk about this is a little bit bigger picture, right? You're going to capture each event and how many times you got emotionally triggered as a result. So now we're not. So now you've done the games already. Now we need to look at the tournament as a whole. And I think a bigger thing to do about tournaments is how many times you get emotionally triggered and how many times does that cause you to turn one strikeout into 3 errors or one error into 2 strikeouts. One emotionally triggering event leading to other opportunities that you could have done well in that you didn't make the adjustment, and you also had non-optimal performance outcomes. Then capture your outcomes as a result of the emotional trigger. So what resulted? I kind of went over that just then. Well, so as a result of the emotional trigger, how did that game go? How did that tournament go when you kept getting emotionally triggered? And then tip number 3 there is capture how you reacted to the emotional trigger. Did you use the acronym AIM? What did you do? Did you get frustrated? Did you get angry? Did your hustle suffer? Did your energy suffer? And then write down what would you do different next time. So the plan, that's where you get your plan from is, okay, well, I need to do these things different if I'm going to have a better tournament and not get emotionally triggered to make adjustments. This is crucial that you can't beat yourself up when it happens because it's never going to stop happening. You're never going to stop getting emotionally triggered. You're human. It happens to everybody. You're never going to stop. Nothing I give you is going to stop emotional triggers, events, unproductive thoughts, toxic thoughts, self-deprecation, right? It's how our brains are wired. Some people, yes, are more optimistic than others. I get that. But for the most part, we're all going to have these unproductive thoughts. It's not about stopping them. That's a big thing I need you to understand. We're going to have these kind of thoughts. It's about how we deal with them, how we react to them, and how we carry them forward or not. That is why I'm trying to give you tools, processes, and ammo for you to combat these things, for you to fight them, for you to manage them. All right. So that's the tournaments. Capture your emotional triggers, your outcomes, how you reacted, and then what you do differently next time. And that way you can be better prepared in the next tournament. Number 5, write down your training or work that you need to do before the next tournament. So be specific. Okay, I need to expect these things. I mean, not expect these things, but never be surprised by when they do happen. And then have this plan. And here are the things I need to do to work on before the next tournament. It's a very intentional process that you need to put into place. And then, of course, write down your goals for your next tournament. And they don't have to be, I want to go, 5 for 10. I want to have a home run. I want to do this. That's great. I'm not saying those are bad goals, but when you really want to make a difference and get to the next level, you're going to start making goals about your mental performance, about things that you control that are going to make a difference in your performance. So I used to give some of my hitters goals of this. How many best swings did you put on good pitches? That's it. Track how many great swings you put on good pitches. I don't care what happened, right? But how many times did you do that? If you consistently put great swings on good pitches, you're going to be a pretty good hitter. Okay. Uh, and write down goals. If I get win or if I get emotionally triggered, I'm going to use my aim, right? I'm going to make in-game adjustments with this process. I'm going to use this thought if this happens, right? Those are goals that I need you to add in addition to, right? Uh, just performance, getting hits, pitching well, ERAs, whatever that is. I think this will make a bigger difference in having a better performance. All right, part 3, the season. You need to capture your performance outcomes. So write down your stats, right? You gotta know what you hit, know what your on base was, know your RBIs, know this. All right. Capture where you fell short of your goals. So if your average wasn't where it needed to be, or your on base, or your stolen bases, or your RBIs, or your home runs, or whatever that was, write those down. Okay. And then I think it's important to ask your coach, what do I need to do to get better next season? Ask a person you trust, right? Asking a person you trust, what do you think I need to get better on? Because it's not just about what you think. It's about because we have a lot of people and good coaches out there that have played the game or have been around the game a long time or played at some level that can tell you what you need to work on. And sometimes it's not just bring your average up. Sometimes it's we need to work on your body language, kid. We're trying to get you recruited. And every time you make a mistake, you look like your puppy just died, and coaches are going to cross you off your list. So let's work on that. Let's work on making sure we're not so emotionally triggered that it looks like we're not in the game. Okay. That can be something that you don't realize you're doing. So it's important to talk to your coaches um, about getting any feedback that they can offer you. Okay. Capture your thoughts of what went, and then I want to hear from yourself. So write down what you thought went well during your season, and where there's room for improvement on next season. Right? It's not just about hey, I want feedback from other people, but I need to give myself feedback, objective feedback on what went well and where is there room for improvement, and then capture what you would have changed about your training if you could go back in time. So pre-fall season, right? And I know there's a very short off season between summer and fall, or after your summer season, what would I change differently? Did I wear myself out? Did I get burned out? Do I need to have more of recovery? So it's not all about putting in more work. It's maybe you put in too much work. Maybe you didn't put enough emphasis on mental performance training, and now you're seeing the effects of it. Um, because sometimes we can train and train and train, and I can hit in the cage, I can hit in the cage, but when I go into games, I'm not seeing it transfer. That I'm telling you, the thing you're missing is mental performance, about your focus and about your thoughts and about how to combat those things. So it can be a lot of different things, but you need to think about what you would have done differently if you could go back in time and change your training. So having hindsight, to go back and think about those things is important as well. Okay. And then write down what changes you'll make moving forward in your training, obviously. So plan for the next season. So next season, I want to see improvements here, here, here in myself. I'm going to do this different. All right. And then this is big. Write down who can help you reach these new goals. So whether it's JB, Becky, Corey, Lauren, or your coach, or something that the organization has to offer, or a local instructor, a book, anything, write down who can help you reach these new goals. What are your resources? It is super important that you understand that you're not in it alone. It takes a lot of people to create a good athlete. Yes, it comes from you, your drive, your competitiveness, your passion for the sport. But I promise you, when you see great players, whether it's softball, baseball, basketball, it doesn't matter what sport, when you see a great player, they didn't get that way by themselves. They had other people helping them. They reached out and they trusted people to help them. And that's super important. You cannot do this alone. So you've got to make sure that you're intentional about writing down who can help you reach these new goals and who are your resources. All right. And then, of course, execute, put it into play. And we talk about executing approaches, executing your plan. It's not going to happen, right? It will not happen if you don't execute. All right. So the last thing I'm about 50 minutes in, it's 8:50. I'm gonna go through these last few quotes that I always love to end with quotes that I think are really going to help you with a develop a growth mindset. So the first one is do what you can with what you have where you are. It's so important. You don't have to have all these other things to get started. Do what you can with what you have where you are. That is what greats do. Whether you have a great facility to train at or a backyard, right? Do what you can with what you have where you are. Face your fears because your goals demand it, right? You cannot get anywhere without facing fears. It takes courage to develop. It takes courage to get better. It is scary. You have to get out of your comfort zone. That's where growth takes place. So face your fears because your goals demand it. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Ignorance cannot be an excuse forever. That's what that means. If you don't know, you don't know. But when you do know, when a coach, when an instructor, when somebody, even your parents, gives you information that can make a difference and you choose not to use it, then that's on you. So do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you better do better. That's what that means. And then I think this is the last one. We can't become what we need to be by remaining what we are, right? So if you're not seeing growth, if you're not seeing getting better, you need to do things differently because you can't keep being the same person if you want to get better, right? And I would offer up a little bit of advice is that my wife said this to my team today. Uh, never be, never look for a group to train with that you're the best in. Because I promise you, you are the people you hang out with. And if you want to get better at a certain thing, find people that are better at that thing and start hanging around them because you will get better, right? So never be the best one in your group. Always find a group that is better than you. And I promise you'll get better. Oh, last one. Sorry. And this is kind of self-explanatory, but whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Self-belief is the key, right? Self-belief is the key. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. All right. Thank you guys. I want to get out of this. And how do I get back just to seeing me? Do I stop sharing, Becky? Okay. So you can all see me now? All right. So this is when I just want to open up to questions. If you guys honestly have genuine questions, I would love to hear them. You can put it in a group chat that Becky's monitoring, or you can just unmute and see if you can. I don't know how, we got a lot of people, so I don't know if that'll go well. But if you do have questions, I'd be happy to answer the best I can. Do you have anything in the chat?
Nope.
Okay.
Here we go. The Mayhalls look like they have a question. I feel like they're coming with us.
I just got one. And,
There we go.
Yeah.
How do you stay consistent with the girls as far as their approaches at the plate? How do you stay consistent other than, being the coach? Obviously, they've got to take it upon themselves, right? But how do you get them to be more consistent in approach at the plate, for instance, the confidence
So
in taking
two
that?
things, two things I'll say is one, I have to make sure my message is super consistent. So it has to be the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. It can't vary. So if I give them information, I can't throw 100 million things at them. I got to be super consistent and keep it simple. So here's how I handle a really simple and consistent message with my hitters so that they can execute a simple plan. I give them three things and three things only that I need them to focus on at the plate. Number one, and these are in order of importance. Number one is the hunter zone. Focus on a zone, not a pitch. Don't try to guess what pitch is coming. It's a zone. Hunt a pitch in that zone. And if you can be on time to it, which is the second area of focus, is be on time. And the third area is feel, not do, feel your best swing, right? That is a great approach that takes no talent, and you control all three of those things. So at any situation, it's hunt your zone, be on time, feel your best swing. Keep it simple. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do between pitches, pre-pitch routine. I would come up with something like that of take a deep breath, repeat a productive thought. You got this. Read something on your bat. Everybody has a physical routine that they do between pitches, but come up with a mental one. And it should always have a deep breath, right? Repeat some type of mantra or phrase, right? Keep it simple. I got this. Focus, whatever that is, and then step in the box and execute, or just say maximum effort, whatever that is, remind yourself, best swing. I love that phrase, best swing. I say it all the time from the third base box, best swing on a good pitch. Hey, hunt your zone, be on time, best swing on a good pitch. And so that's consistent. Like my girls hear it in their sleep. They joke about it. They know what I'm going to say. And so you have to kind of beat them over the head with just a consistent message, but it always has to be something that they're in charge of. And they can, it can be a simple, really three-step process like that. I hope that helps. Anyone else?
We got one in the chat, Brett.
Oh, what does it say? I don't have mine.
Can you see it?
If the mindset of aim isn't helping working in that moment, what is the next best thing to do? Okay, so if acknowledging, interpreting, and managing isn't working, or for whatever reason, the best thing to do is focus on your breathing. Okay, and I mean focus on your breathing to where you hear your breath in and out, in and out. Take 5 seconds to take a deep breath, more than one, right? And make sure, right, that I call it find your focus, find your calm. And so we need to make sure that even when the pressure is on, right, and we need to make sure we got to take a moment to find our breathing, find what we should be focused on, and find our calm. So find something to focus on that you control, whether it's your effort, whether it's your attitude, whether it's just repeating a phrase, but it's breathing, find your focus, find your calm. That is super simple and something you can control. So if you need to break it down, if aim isn't working, then that's the next best thing, I think, is breathe. Focus on your breathing, find your focus, find your calm. And it really has to do with just taking a moment. If you need to close your eyes to do it. Here's another thing to help. Sing a song. I know that sounds weird, but music is a powerful tool to help us stay in the moment and make us feel better and more relaxed, right? That's why I have a speaker that I take and we warm up to music. I think it's a great thing to do. I tell my girls, if you're nervous, if you're going into the future, the past, and you're not in the moment, sing your favorite song, hum the tune, say the lyrics in your head, and then breathe, and you'll be better prepared for the next pitch. The next one is, how should my approach to practice sessions or hitting lessons from games? Did I read that? How should my approach differ, maybe?
I think be different from
Be
you.
different from games. Okay. How should my approach to practice sessions or hitting lessons differ from games? To me, very little. Very little. Here's the thing. When I give lessons, we talk about the approach. So if I see somebody struggling when I throw front toss, like I throw it hard. You hit with me, you know what I'm talking about. We call it grip and rip it. And they are not focused on the right things. I tell them, step out, take a breath, focus on what you're trying to do here. Be athletic, be aggressive, right? So I try to make sure that they're doing those same things. And the next pitch is always better, right? It's boom, they hit it. Okay. And then I stop and I tell them, okay, that's what I'm talking about. That's what you have to do in games. So we need to have a training session or a hitting lesson or whatever that is to simulate a game so that we're doing the same things in games. You have to be able to, in a lesson or a session or training or whatever, train like it is a game. We have to do that. We were doing that today at practice with Becky's team. I'm like, these are game situations, girls. There's no jogging. There's no, and some of them were started to panic, and we had to stop them. We had to tell them to find your calm, tell them to breathe, right? Tell them to calm down and focus on breathing, do these things, and because some of them were putting that pressure on themselves. So that's my thing is I don't think it should be that different. I think if you're having good practices and good training sessions, there should be most of it should be like a game. Right now, some of it's not. You're going to be taking your time and you're going to do things that you're working on specific things in your swing. It's not going to be like a game. I get that. But there should be a portion of it that should put into effect the same approach you would have in a game. If you're having a practice, whether it's defense or pitching, throw to a live batter, simulate an at bat, and simulate a high pressure situation to where you can feel that kind of pressure so you know how to deal with it. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means if you fail, try it again. Try to be more aggressive. Try to be confident. Try to have those productive thoughts. I stop sometimes and I say, "Hey, what are you thinking right now?" Just like I did today with my hitter. And I usually know what they're focused on or thinking, right? And then I tell them, "Hey, how do we change that? What should we talk about differently in our heads?" So I hope that helps. Anybody else? I'm so glad we had a good turnout. This is awesome.
Yep.
And if you want me to do more of these, girls, guys, let me know. I can do a lot of these. It doesn't take much to 45, 50 minutes just to get on and talk about different things. We can get very specific about certain things and we can get very broad about other things. Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone over the hour. You're very welcome. And I don't think anyone else has any other questions. We can call it a night, huh, Becky?
That sounds good.
All right. Well, guys, I just want to say one more thing. Thank you so much for tuning in. It really, really makes my heart happy that you guys are tuning in to listen to Old Coach. But if you have any follow-up questions, if you think of something later, right, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.